Now we're going on to Beyond Friction, evolving POS propositions to meet retailers and customers' increasingly complex needs. And I'd like to introduce David Parker from Polymethyl Consulting to the stage. Please, David.
Thank you very much. Much appreciated. We're actually going to make you work. As you'll notice on one of the screens, we have a Slido poll. I hope all of you can either go through the Money20 app to get to it or log in on Slido. And we've got 2 questions for you. So as you said, my name is David Parker. I'm the CEO of Polymethyl Consulting, and we do consulting around Europe, Africa, and the Middle East on payments. So if you could start off by answering the first question, there's going to be a second one. I'm going to get my panelists up on stage now at the same time. So if you could answer the first question quickly, and then we'll move on to the second question while they're all coming up here and getting seated. Okay, final call for answers on this one, please, so we can move on. Oh, still moving about a bit. Okay, if we can go to the next question, please. So, frictionless payments. Will the requirement for SCA kill frictionless payments? We all hear about the Uber experience. You get out, you hardly know you've paid. Will it kill it? Okay, that's great. I think we'll just get the final few votes in. And while that's happening, I'm going to start saying, would you like to introduce yourselves, please? And the company you're from, and why you're on stage.
Okay, my name is Leo Nilsson. I'm the Chief Product Officer for iZettle. I'm on this stage because iZettle has very much gone from a payments-focused company to become a company that provides a commerce platform for small businesses, which now also entails software for both point of sale, invoice, and e-commerce, as well as a new set of products to help our merchants grow, including capital and marketing. And I've been with iZettle for roughly 5 years.
Mike Camerling, I'm with Aevi. I'm here today to basically fight for the SMEs who we think need more value-added apps and services around the space, with everything coming in their direction and those services being provided by, in our case, the parties, the merchant banks and the merchants acquirers.
All right, Amy Parsons, I'm with Discover Financial Services. We really actually manage off the entire space of the industry. I run Global Acceptance, which is actually the component of the business that manages all the entire value chain between us as a network all the way through to merchants themselves. So feel like we have a lot to bring to the table in regards to understanding the industry, how things are moving, some of the disruptions that are happening, and really all the new players that are showing up in this space.
I'm June Felix. I'm the regional president of Verifone for Europe and Russia. And I'm on stage because Verifone has actually served in 150 countries, big, small, and medium merchants across the world, as well as partnered with a lot of the acquirers and the banks to deliver a whole range of solutions. But also, what's important is we have an open platform that really makes it possible for delivering capability to the small merchants that they only dream of.
Thank you very much. So you can hear a real expert panel we have here. Now, my job up here is to ask nice and easy questions. Your job out there is to send me really nasty ones through Slido that I'm forced to ask. Okay, so I really do need you to go through Slido or the app and ask all the questions I'm not allowed to ask. So please, okay, because they vet me all my questions I'm allowed to ask. So you've got to ask the nice and nasty ones. I am actually going to start with your audience participation poll as the first question for my panel, though, because Accenture forecast that over the next 5 years, 30% of all card payments could disappear with PSD2 and payment initiation service providers. You as an audience are even sort of almost more aggressive, 47%, 25 to 50%. Wow, it's, you know, we could see a lot of card payments disappear. I'm going to turn to my panel here and say, you know, are we looking at a revolution coming to the point of sale, both for online and offline, but particularly online, where with PSD2 and this payment initiation service providers, are consumers going to really start doing the alternative and not using their cards online so much?
I mean, I'll start, I guess, to kick it off. I think the world is completely changing. When you look at even just going back, you know, I'll say 10 years, but even if you go back 5 years, the amount of technology and the different types of technology we had available to us weren't what we can see today. And so because of that, I always say if you can dream it, technology can build it. And I think there's a lot of you in the room that do that every single day. And so when you think about reinventing how we engage with the world, layering digital with really kind of what we do every single day, the experiences are completely different, right? And we all use them every day because we live and breathe in the payment space, and so we try all that stuff out. I also think, too, that we're seeing the costs in the actual hardware come down. Things are very mobile now. You can move around the space, whether you're a merchant or a consumer, so that interaction point can be based in the cloud or it could be based between two very inexpensive devices. So what we're seeing is just the complete experience at commerce completely changed. So yeah, I think it'll disappear from the perspective it won't be an explicit action that we're taking necessarily every time we go to pay for something.
But if we look at something like Holland.
I think the question is time. And you know, unfortunately, we in Europe understand every country is different, understand every ecosystem is different. And I think that it's really going to be, to your point, all the technology is there. The question is, how quickly can the merchants really adopt this? How easy is it for them to do that? And then there's also the consumer. There's a question, you know, GDPR is out there as a big topic. We're supposed to own all our data. And it all sounds wonderful, but it is massively confusing for people. And in some countries, they're very paranoid about sharing their banking details. Other countries, there's absolutely no problem. So I think it's going to be generational, but it's also going to be cultural differences. They're going to make a big, big difference here.
Yeah, I agree. I think it will follow sort of the wave of social media as well in terms of acceptance and how fast we share data there. Because if I look at my parents, for example, they're even afraid of online banking currently. If I look at all of us, we probably will talk to each other, and especially people outside the industry will seek advice, read about it, and we weigh the benefits. If I look at my children and my daughter, she just goes, is it convenient? Here we go.
Okay, so hang on, pick up this point, the consumer, okay, because two of you mentioned it here. For years, consumers get told, guard your bank details. You know, phishing attacks and everything, guard them, don't give them to anyone. And now we're saying, now, give everyone your bank details so you can pay. Oh, yeah, come on, we spent years telling everyone not to give them bank details, and now we're saying, use your bank detail. I mean...
I think from that point, again, it actually comes down in my mind, all of this is a consumer game in the end. It's about the expectations that the consumer put on the business as such, on the process of making the purchase, or perhaps also the type of service you can receive after. I'm from Sweden. In Sweden, I have no problem you know, sharing both my social security number and bank details any given day, because I trust the process, I trust the system. It's probably a bad idea, to be honest, that I do it, but I still do it. And I think it's more about getting the consumer to sort of realize the convenience and trust the process. I don't see that as necessarily a big
But we have spent years telling the consumer, don't give your bank details away. They're the bit you should lock up. And now we're going to say, give them to everyone so you can pay.
But we said that because there was a risk and absolutely no reward against that. And I think now, to June's point as well, the merchants will have to show in their acceptance, and they start to drive it, that actually sharing those details through whatever apps or whatever we're going to do together makes it worth it. If you only talk about risk, they won't share at all.
Okay. So it really is changing. Okay, let's nip to the second audience question, if that's all right. Yep, it's up now. Great. So my little iPad problems here, so I couldn't see your questions. Apologies to everyone. We're just going to quickly pull up the second audience question, I think, now, that you did, because I think this whole issue of secure customer authentication is quite interesting, this whole area. It's obviously regulation that's being imposed on all of us, and we've got to do it. And I've got a really simple I suppose, question in my head around how much secure customer authentication, it's great. Friction reduces fraud, but friction reduces the merchant's ability to get payments in. And if they can't get payments in, they don't get sales. You know, how much of this whole problem are we going to have in, you know, secure customer authentication now for every online transaction, the fact that marketplaces can't be whitelisted? Is that going to even the table out to small merchants now? I'm just in this whole area and your views on it.
Well, I think, I mean, it kind of reminds me on EMV coming to the US, in a sense, right? It's this game of you have the security and you have the actual customer experience. And it's hard to sort of, in the very beginning, to understand the net value of what's going to happen there. My view is that it's obviously going to affect online transactions. I believe, on the other hand, that you have lots of new technology coming in that are already addressing this. Perhaps it can drive adoption of wallets that are already in the market that have this inherent in their experience.
But I mentioned the audience is saying here, if I look it up, SCA is not going to affect frictionless payments at all, 42%.
I would agree with that. I mean, I think when you look at where we were before we had mobile devices where we were using payments, we were using static, you know, numbers that we would give out to people. You could, you know, tell it over the phone. As we moved into mobile payments, we had to digitize the entire space. So we had to put everything in a new dimension that didn't exist before. So when I think about SCA, I feel like that's just another step in the same process. We've got a lot of people looking at the industry. It is inherent upon all of us in this room. We're moving people's money. You mess up people's money, they don't get, they're not usually very happy. So I think the security components that we bring into play have to be critical, and making sure that it is frictionless so that they feel good about the transaction, that it is secure, but yet that it's not interrupting whatever it is that they're trying to do in a way that feels prohibitive. I think it's inherent upon all of us to actually get there and believe there's enough companies in this business to figure it out.
Well, I agree there's enough companies to figure it out, but I also think that it's this dynamic challenge. Secure consumer authentication is going to add milliseconds, seconds, et cetera. And we know that in some industries that those seconds count and they turn into real dollars. I think the way we've been doing it at Verifone is to say, you know, during that elapsed time, at the last inch of the transaction, how do you make that an experience that's memorable, not just waiting for the little dial to turn, right, little clock to turn? How do you get entertained during that time? How do you get served up content that would be really relevant to you? And I think that's where the magic can happen, so that you can take this experience, which is pretty boring, right, you know, paying, and make it into a relevant concierge-like service that says, oh, because I used XYZ card or XYZ wallet, I now have a, you know, curated offer, or I have something that reminds me that why I came into this store. So I think if we're clever, to your point, how do we make that a lapse not seem like a pleasant part of the experience? So I think that's where we could go.
But we are seeing today, you know, VBV, MasterCard, lead to what, 20, 30% drop-offs in baskets when it's enforced. If we're going to get really enforced on every transaction, especially where you can't be whitelisted, aren't we going to get some real merchants screaming on this?
Yeah, I think you could if it didn't evolve. You know, I'll say as being a member of EMVCo, there's been a lot of work done on really taking a look at really what is our product called Protect By, and saying how do you actually make it so it's invisible from a security perspective, but yet still creates the security level that you're looking for. So we call it really 2.0, I know, very unique name, but it is really kind of the next level of security that becomes quite invisible to the consumer, but yet still authenticates in a way that's very secure.
Okay.
And allows really a data exchange between, I'll say, kind of an issuer and a merchant real time with different mechanisms, right? And technically it can get very complex, but I think, again, with the degree of technology we have out there, it's definitely a very feasible alternative that's coming soon.
Okay. There's an interesting question here from the audience saying, are POS terminals a constraint on involving payment methods? So given we've got on the panel here,
only the old ones.
Only the old ones.
Yeah.
So as long as the merchants get up to date, they're safe.
No, because there's, you know, it's like everything. You know, you have old technology and then you expect it to do amazing things. That's not credible, right? And as you were saying, there's so many new technologies, both in the cloud, the network, and also in the POS terminals. I mean, we've launched new lines of capabilities that are more powerful. You can watch advertising on these things. You can actually have really dynamic and highly interactive sessions. You can run your whole store from something that looks like an iPad, well, like an iPhone. So, you know, it is a question of what are you asking the right question? Is the right technology deployed against the right problem? So if you ask the old bricks to do these cool things, absolutely not. But, you know, that's like walking around with a Nokia phone.
I think the question is also, should you still call it a POS terminal? Or is the POS terminal becoming a business tool, and can any other device be a POS terminal? So you can turn it upside down and say, okay, you know, are we building out the POS with more apps for SMEs to service them? I think we're on the same track there. Or are we going to see a whole range of other smarter devices that we can give POS functionality in order to...
So it's a checkout unit. Let's just call it a checkout unit.
It's a business tool.
Business tool.
It's a business tool.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think, I mean, how this sort of point of sale experience, if you think of the point of sale, like the literal interpretation, the point at which the consumer and the merchant meet and conduct some type of business, it can happen anywhere, and it's just a matter of what tool you use. If that's on a phone or a tablet or online or on a separate device, I think it's a secondary question, actually. I wouldn't see it as limiting. It's just a tool right now, and that will evolve over time.
Okay. Yeah, and I would actually add, I mean, I think the infrastructure, you know, we say point of sale terminals as it shows up in the question, but at the end of the day, there's a very incredibly complex infrastructure that lives behind these sub-split-second transactions that consumers have no idea could be traveling through 10 to 15 partners as it makes its way all the way to their account and comes back again. So I think that might be where some of the constraints actually end up existing, is through all those channels, you have to make it work through that entire chain. So it's a very complex industry. It's probably time. This is where I think time becomes a very important factor. Because if you have to have 15 things in, you know, I'll say an exponentially complex spider web of activity, that's a lot of stuff to actually make operate exactly the same. But it creates opportunity, right? Which is what allows all of us to come in and come up with new things and really look at the marketplace different. And be able to compete on different services and aspects that become more important to the experience versus just, you know, a payment transaction.
Okay.
I do think we, sitting here, and a lot of parties in the audience as well, have a responsibility to clarify that to the merchants. Because they listen to all of this and go, and now what? What do you want me to do? Which device do I need to have then? What app do you want me to run then? And how is this going to tie together and do the magic behind the screens? And I do think the whole industry sort of needs that trusted source of saying, well, you hear 27 different things, but if you would start here, that would be a good base, and we'll take it further from there. I think that's something we're seeing everywhere.
Okay. I should pick up the top question here, because we've got a lot of likes on it, so it's only fair to do, which is, can POS vendors work directly with PSD2-based alternative payment networks to put an end to PSP card schemes and issuing banks extorting merchants? Now, there's obviously a statement here about extorting merchants. One could argue that actually merchants these days in Europe are paying far too little for their transactions because who do they think is going to pay? So, but I think there's a bigger point here, which is as we move to this world of PSD2, open banking, where the card schemes are effectively being circumvented, unfortunately, is there an actual opportunity for the terminal manufacturers or people like yourself to actually almost start working directly with the banks? Are you seeing this in a PISP world? I mean, where are you seeing this going to? I'm looking at Verifone and my people on the end here for that. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask the answer there.
But to me, I think the short answer is, of course. To me, it's all about...
So are you starting to plan for this today? Are you having conversations?
We're talking to everybody we could be talking to. But my point is, it's all, especially in the context of small businesses, it's all driven by what the consumer will prefer. if a consumer prefers to pay in a certain way, of course we need to help small businesses accept that payment method. And if we need to connect them with a bank to do that, that's what we do. I think I don't see that to be a problem, but I also think that in this question there's assumptions about the card networks not being part of the PSD infrastructure, what I think is...
Although MasterCard announced their big play in this space only yesterday.
They bought Vocalink, right? So,
yeah,
yeah, they are in that game as well, and I think that's...
But Verifone, you deal with the tier 1 guys.
Yeah, we deal with the tier 1 guys. We deal with all of them. I think the thing that we're going to see is we're basically a platform. So we're going to be agnostic. If Oshan wants to do open banking or connect to a PSP, PISP, we will do that. So we're really quite agnostic about that. Today, we already handle all sorts of alternative payments. We work with mobile pay in the Nordics. We work with Apple Pay, Google Pay, Samsung Pay, Amazon Pay, and all the card groups. So we're there to facilitate the transactions, but also make them something more than just the payment. So that it's a sticky experience for the merchant, and they come back.
But is all of this regulation putting the small business at a disadvantage? Because, you know, it's easy, you know, for the big guys to manage it all, but, you know, you've got GDPR, you've got this PS. I sometimes feel the small guys actually...
But that's why we actually built, but that's why we actually built platforms that can scale to the small, right? So we allow the boutiques to compete with the chains. So that's the democratization of technology. So being able to offer the same marketplace to a small merchant as well as a big merchant, offering it on a white label basis through the acquirers or the processors, or, you know, on the web if the merchant wants to go and do that. But generally, merchants can't be bothered. They usually have a trusted, you know, partner that they work with, and we enable all of that so that in a turnkey way, they can get everything that they would need.
I don't think it's necessarily the platform that makes it happen. So the SMEs are sitting there, they can't go and ask their CTO to sort it out, do an investigation, come back with a budget and get it done. So they really need to have a platform, I fully agree, but what's more important is the content on that platform. So who's going to tell me what combination of apps and services make me able to accept those kind of payments if I want to. And I actually think they will be alongside each other for quite a long time, because there's no one going to switch to one or the other straight away. And I also feel that it's possibly not anymore one party that can have it all. You need to cooperate, and there needs to be, you know, that single source where we say, okay, merchants, this is what you do if you want to do X, Y, and Z of those. But we need to guide them. We need to help them with content.
But this is where opportunity comes into play, and we've seen a lot of service providers show up that didn't even exist a handful of years ago, who have stepped in and said, I'm going to take on all of this complexity for you, whether it's connecting to 400 different things, right, that you actually might want to pay with at some point in time, and the complexity of all the regulatory requirements and everything that has to go into place. That actually has become part of a service offering for many, many players out there. So I think it's actually been a great point of opportunity for new people to step into or new companies to step into the industry. It's also a way for those of us who have been in the industry for a long time to reinvent, right? How do you step to an adjacency or be additive in your services so that you then actually take all of that away from the merchants? So the SMEs might actually have an advantage because they might be given something that actually just solves all of that on their behalf.
Okay, so
there's some beauty in that simplicity.
Well, I agree with the point there that
beauty in the simplicity. I love that.
Right.
But there's one point there. I think I agree. It's, you know, it's I mean, iZettle's entire business is built on the idea of sort of giving access to the same types of tools that big businesses have. So yes, it has opened up for new players. But I think, to your point a bit, that any time a new regulation comes along, most of the times, they are usually done to protect the consumer, which makes sense. Mm-hmm. Usually done to protect the consumer against enterprises. Mm-hmm. And in between there, small businesses always get stuck. Yeah. So we're also in a situation where, if you think it from a small merchant's perspective, they have no choice soon. They have to go to a platform, which is not necessarily a world which I think is good. I mean, especially if it's regulation driving it. If they want to, you know, join iZettle to improve their business, to sell more, to, you know, make their life a little bit easier, that's great. But the big piece of that now is to take regulation out of their worries. And that's not necessarily a great place, I think, to be in, at least not for the small business.
But is the small business at an advantage then when it comes to like omni-channel, because it's, you know, a website and one till versus the big guy who's got all of this, or is it the other way around because he's got all the budgets? I mean, we're moving towards real omni-channel. The consumer is expecting to get the same experience. Yeah. And I'm just interested in both from the US experience you're seeing, and also you do so many different countries you look after at Verifone. What are you seeing in this space? Because to me, this is a real driver of retail.
Well, we've done a lot of research, research of SMBs, and what we're finding is that the SMBs are really confused, right? To your point, they have a lot of different technologies. If you have more than one store, let's say you have 2 or 3 stores, even as an SMB, you're trying to figure out, you know, how do I do omnichannel? How do I do web? How do I do in-store? How do I handle all these alternative payments? So what we're seeing is that they really are looking for, you know, something that's simple and bundled together for them, but really recognizing the fact that one's a beauty salon and another one is a bike shop and somebody else that might have a quick service restaurant. They have different needs, right? So that's where having a flexible capability to, you know, really procure those combinations and bundles, either suggested good, better, best. We have a marketplace that allows us to do that, and, you know, when they enroll, they can just say simple things about who they are, how big they are, and their suggestions. Sort of like when you go to Amazon and you get your books, right? There's a suggestion. So we've tried to figure out how to make that really simple. So that's actually going live in the United States with some of the biggest partners that we have, like WorldPay, and people like Elevon are looking at these integrated point of sale systems. But we're also seeing that in Europe, that they really want partnerships with the people they trust, right? So there's some acquirers that they trust, banks that they trust, or just going direct. Being able to serve both models is important.
Yeah, I think the complexity shows up. We talk about small merchants, you know, a lot of times the physical locations, but ultimately today you could be a seller online with stuff in your, you know, secondary room in your flat or whatever the case may be. So you can actually move across markets now very, very easily as a business in ways that you couldn't before. So the complexity with omnichannel really shows up with multi-markets. And then you've got currency things potentially that start to show up in the dialogue. And then it also, too, we've got all these different channels operating, whether you're paying with a phone, a card, a device, I mean, whatever it may be that you could show up with, even including online. So I think that that adds, again, to that level of complexity when we start talking about omnichannel. But the real key is the integration in with inventory. So if you kind of go a little bit more upscale to bigger, larger merchants, their inventory streams, unfortunately, were built around their channels. And so they have these direct lines that they're now trying to cross-pollinate. And I think consumers are really, they have an absolute expectation that I can buy it in store, I can return it in some different way, or I can buy it online and ship it to my house, or I can buy it in the store and ship it to my house. So they're looking for that and returns to operate in any way that they try to interact.
Absolutely.
And so that's a significant level of complexity that starts to show up in omnicommerce. And again, it's just a great place for opportunity.
So does the small business have an advantage? They only have maybe 1 or 2 stores. It does make it a bit simpler. Probably newer technology. Is that an area where actually smaller retail should be grabbing it?
It could be. Finding providers is hard for small merchants, right? I mean, we're not an easy industry to figure out, unfortunately. So, I mean, I think that's where we've got to keep things simple and really try to make sure they understand.
I'm looking at the 2 guys here. Are you delivering it then for small business?
It's different for us because we enable the current providers to deliver that. And I think the key there is, and I so agree with you, you have all these options. And you said it before as well, the one thing you don't want as a small merchant is now yet again be pushed in a box and here you go, you need to have everything from me. What we want is to say, you can now choose. Out of all these difficult things you see, you can now choose what device, what app, and probably to make a difference for a bike shop, for example, you only need 2 apps to change their entire business process. So in that case, I do think if we all decide to really address that, especially at lower end of the SMEs, because often they have been in contract with you for a very long time, and after 3 years you go, oh, we lost them. I actually never had any conversation with them. If we now start truly giving them solutions as part of the relationship, then I think there's the opportunity you keep talking about.
Yeah,
absolutely.
But sometimes we oversimplify too, because we think an app will, an app for the consumer will do it, right? It's actually also running their entire estate, their store, the inventory, to your point, and having the ability to handle both the business side apps, the accounting apps, as well as the offers, the loyalty, is not trivial. So I think that's why new technology that's in existence can actually solve that problem, whereas I think we were looking at like the iPhone app warehouse or app store, thinking that would be the panacea of everything, and it's a lot more complicated to integrate a payment system with an inventory management system and have that really simple for people.
I think, so my view on omnichannel, and I think, which actually I do believe can become a bit easier from a small business perspective. So I usually take the view, I do the analogy of, the way that anybody here could interact with sort of on a continuous and coherent basis with your friends. Talking, you can have a conversation over days using 5 different channels. You talk on the phone, you meet in person, you do a messenger, you do a Snapchat, all of that kind of is done in a coherent way. And actually I think that omnichannel in my mind is to create that same experience between the merchant and the consumer. And I think to start with a small business, because I don't believe anybody has solved that. Omnichannel is the biggest buzzword in this industry, and I don't think anybody really has solved it.
So let me ask that question, because whether we like it or not, data that flows down card schemes is based on the old, 40 punch card system. It's the data you can get on the 40 punch.
I hope we've advanced a little since then.
No, but it's still the, but it's still the amount of data
more
you can get. It's still the same amount of data that flows down. There's still, for majority of transactions, it's still very basic level 1 data that flows down there. It's not the data that the modern businesses would like to get flowing down, the banks would like, other people would like, to start to use that data for a myriad of reasons. We've started to see digital receipts becoming more norm, in the US more so than in Europe, about 40, 50, I mean, it's interesting, a friend of mine goes to the US, he said every hotel he goes to sends him an email receipt. And I went back through and said, I haven't had one in the last year from all my traveling over in Europe. It's that black and white. How much are we going to see the services and the uses? Because once people start sending out digital receipts, they're sharing the data. So therefore, that empowers other people than the retailers to have that data. I think there's a big battle going to go on who controls that data and how you can use that data, therefore. And I'm just wondering what you're seeing coming out of that or might see as the future on that.
Well, I mean, the first place we all need to start is the data. At the end of the day, from a consumer perspective, they need to make sure they're giving the companies the right permissions to use the data in the ways they think you're going to be using it. And I think it's very important for all of us to make sure that's the case. We all have lots of data. I mean, even we talk about it being limited to transaction, but we're running data along parallel streams that are connecting, that are proliferating different databases. I mean, we have the ability now to look for any merchant around the globe. You can look where it's at. You can see the types of payments that they offer, the different ways people can pay, and that's all available now. That's being consolidated in different ways. As long as the consumers are aware of what you're doing with their data and what purpose it's being used for, again, I think that that's where you can see some of this stuff start to proliferate itself and actually expand it into additional services that help make the payment more valuable and not just, the little dial spinning, so to speak.
But from a Verifone point of view, are you seeing a lot of demand from merchants to start to want to offer this additional stuff to their customers?
Absolutely. Digital receipts are very, very, are a growing demand because merchants actually understand that's going to be very valuable for them to do the analysis, for us to actually provide services that are tailored to those individuals, because it's a totally different thing. Somebody was saying, this is a man saying that he goes in and he shops online on Amazon for his daughter, he shops online for his wife, and he shops online for himself. And as a result, they're totally confused as to who this person is, right? Because they have the line item detail, but they can't attribute it very effectively to him. Whereas when you're in store and then you actually use your card as an authentication, those pink golf balls, that you've actually selected, you can actually you can say those are, you can tick and actually attribute those to the right individual because there's that kind of more powerful information. So we actually think that at the last inch, you can actually leverage that data, and the receipts are becoming more powerful because you're linking that to other offers, maybe to a rating, maybe to another service. So if you connect it, the digital receipt and the data, to a value, that increases dramatically.
Yeah, it's one of the things we drive in the Aevi ecosystem. So, you know, all the apps from the developer network, we don't make any ourselves. When they use the SDK, we make sure these apps can actually talk to each other. So I think the receipt is only one spin-off of it. It's how the basket travels over all the apps. What was the influence from the starting app all the way to the payment? And then actually the payment could even be in different phases and split out over handed off to a table, to the rating, and then come back. Tying that data all together is where it really plays, I think.
Okay. We're running out of time now, so I'm a great believer in crystal ball thinking, but to some extent, I like to look really short term. Over the next 24 months, so I hate to say it, almost in your business plan today, what do you think is going to be the biggest change? The title of this is Beyond Friction, Evolving POS. Over the next 2 years, are we going to see a lot of change? Is it going to be a slight evolution? What are we going to see from each of your areas that you think is going to have the biggest impact? Not on this audience, but on actually the consumer. Because ultimately, we're all beholden eventually to the consumer and what they do. So what do you think? And I'm going to start from this end. What are you going to see over the next 2 years that's going to affect you the greatest, do you think?
No, I think that, I very much view the point of sale as kind of a collector and connector of data, and that in a sense will turn into a broad range of automation across what a small business can do, making them more competitive. So I actually think the big drive that the consumer will experience is a very new commerce landscape from small businesses and their relevance.
Yeah, pretty much the same. So the adoption of the smarter POSes, or the business tools as we discussed, the fact that parties start to offer tailored bundles of apps to the SMEs that they can then use to run their business better and service the customer better.
I'd say low-cost equipment is probably, we've got small little tiny devices that are very mobile now, that are very low cost. It's actually expanding our industry into places it couldn't exist before. And that, I think, is actually
the expansion of the acceptance, therefore, network.
Yeah, if you want to think about it as acceptance points, but it's really where you can actually create electronic payments in some way, shape, or form. For
us, it's going to be the explosion of services. So we're going to have many more new services that can be delivered online as well as at the last inches of retail. And then that connected experience, whether it's mobile, on a device that we have, devices that we operate and manage. So we see it as really a connected commerce and services play.
Okay. Well, with that, I'm going to say apologies. We didn't get to answer all the audience questions. I'm sure the panelists will be around at their stands and everything else, and they're happy to take questions. Some of them were very specific, so that's why I didn't pick them up, because they were one party only. So if we could put our hands together and thank a great set of panelists, thank you very much. Much appreciated.